The story of alcohol goes back much deeper into time than most people realize, not just centuries, but millions of years. Long before the first brewery was ever built or the first bottle of wine was poured, our ancestors were already tasting alcohol. It all began nearly 10 million years ago in the African rainforest, when a prehistoric primate decided to eat a fermented fruit that had fallen to the jungle floor. That single bite set in motion a relationship between humans and alcohol that would span millions of years, shape our evolution, and eventually give birth to civilization itself. In this video, we dive deep into the fascinating history of alcohol, from that first fermented fruit to ancient China, to the Natufian caves of Israel, to the monumental ruins of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and the beer-fueled society of ancient Egypt. Watch till the end, and it might just change the way you look at your next drink. In 2014, Robert Dudley, a professor of integrative biology at UC Berkeley, published a book called The Drunken Monkey. His hypothesis was simple but revolutionary. Dudley argued that the human attraction to alcohol didn't begin with civilization, it didn't begin with farming, it didn't even begin with our species. It began with our primate ancestors, millions of years ago, who relied on fruit as a primary food source. When fruit falls to the jungle floor, it begins to ferment. Yeast consumes the sugars and produces ethanol, alcohol. And our ancestors, it turns out, could smell it. The ability to detect fermented fruit gave primates a survival advantage. It helped them find calories in times of scarcity. It also helped them avoid overripe, toxic fruit because the same smell told them how ripe it was. Over millions of years, this preference for low levels of alcohol became hardwired into our biology. The attraction to alcohol isn't a modern weakness, it's an evolutionary inheritance. We didn't discover alcohol, we evolved with it. Fast forward to about 13,000 years ago. The Natufian people lived in the Levant, the region that includes modern-day Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. They were semi-sedentary hunter-gatherers. They buried their dead with flowers, and they brewed beer. In 2018, a team led by archaeologist Li Liu from Stanford University analyzed 3 stone mortars from Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel. What they found was remarkable. The mortars contained starch residues and microscopic plant particles, phytoliths, that are typical in the transformation of wheat and barley to booze. The researchers concluded that the Natufians had used these mortars to brew beer 13,000 years ago, making it the oldest known evidence of man-made alcohol in the world. The brewing process likely involved 3 stages. First, the grains were malted, germinated in water, drained, dried, and stored. Second, the malt was mashed, crushed, mixed with water, and heated. Third, the mixture was left to ferment with wild yeast. The beer would have been low in alcohol and looked more like thin porridge than the frothy drink we know today. But the most fascinating discovery: the site was a graveyard. The mortars were found next to human burials. The Natufians weren't brewing beer for the breakfast, they were brewing it for the dead. Alcohol was used in ritual feasts to venerate the dead and strengthen social bonds among the living. If the Natufians were brewing beer for the dead, the people of Göbekli Tepe were brewing it for the living. Göbekli Tepe is an archaeological site in southeastern Turkey, dated between 9,400 and 11,000 years ago. It's often called the world's oldest known temple, twice as old as Stonehenge. But it wasn't a temple in the way we think of it. No one lived there, no one farmed there. People came to Göbekli Tepe to gather, to feast, to dance, and to party. In 2012, archaeologists uncovered 6 large limestone troughs. Each could hold up to 42 gallons of liquid. At the bottom of these vessels, they found traces of oxalate, a compound that develops during the mashing and fermentation of cereals. At the dawn of the Neolithic, hunter-gatherers congregating at Göbekli Tepe created social and ideological cohesion through the carving of decorated pillars, dancing, feasting, and almost certainly the drinking of beer made from fermented wild crops. Subsequent finds reinforced this picture. Grinding tools for processing grains, decorated stone drinking vessels, miniature stone masks suggesting attendees may have worn disguises to the party. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a quiet place of worship, it was the Neolithic equivalent of a music festival. And beer was the social glue. This raises a provocative question. Which came first, beer or bread? For decades, the dominant theory was that humans began farming to make bread. The caloric efficiency of cereals supposedly drove people to settle down and domesticate grains. But a growing number of archaeologists are taking a different view. In 1953, American researcher Robert Braidwood provocatively asked, could the discovery that fermented mash gives a nutritious and pleasant drink have stimulated people to cultivate grain more than bread? The discoveries at Raqefet Cave and Göbekli Tepe have given this question new weight. The beer residues at Raqefet predate farming in the Near East by as much as 2,000 years, and alcohol production globally by some 4,000 years. This suggests that alcohol wasn't a byproduct of agriculture. It may have been the reason agriculture began in the first place. People didn't farm to make bread, they farmed to make beer. And those beers fueled the feasts that brought communities together, created social bonds, and eventually inspired the first permanent villages. Around the same time as the Natufians were brewing beer in Israel, people on the other side of the world were also experimenting with alcohol. In ancient China, at a site called Jiahu in the Yellow River Valley, archaeologists have found what may be the earliest known alcohol recipe. The discovery was made by Patrick McGovern, often called the Indiana Jones of ancient wine. McGovern was the scientific director of the Biomolecular Archaeology Project at the Penn Museum. Over his career, he analyzed pottery from sites around the world and identified the world's oldest alcoholic beverages. At Jiahu, he found evidence of a mixed fermented drink made from rice, honey, and fruit dating to about 7,000 BCE. That's not a mistake or a random fluke, it's a recipe. It shows that by the time humans were farming, they were already using their crops to brew alcohol, and they were getting good at it. No discussion of ancient alcohol is complete without mentioning ancient Egypt. Beer was the drink of the pharaohs and of the workers who built their pyramids. Archaeological evidence from excavations near the Giza Plateau shows that beer rations were paid to pyramid workers who were building the pharaoh's eternal resting place under the blazing desert sun. This beer, the bread beer, was a staple of the Egyptian diet. It was thick, nourishing, and cheap. It gave energy. It quenched thirst. It kept the workers going. It's likely that one of the reasons the Great Pyramid of Giza was built at all was beer. So what does this history tell us? It tells us that alcohol is not a modern invention. It's not a social problem or a health risk we accidentally stumbled into. It's a human invention that goes back to the beginning of human society itself. Our ancestors were drinking alcohol before they were farming. They were drinking alcohol before they were building cities. They were drinking alcohol before they were writing down history. Alcohol helped build civilization. It brought people together. It fueled the feasts that formed the first communities. But it also changed us. It altered our biology, our evolution, and our culture in ways we're still discovering. What began as a primate foraging strategy evolved into a ritual, then a medicine, then a tool, and finally, a drug. So next time you raise a glass, think about what's in it. It's not just a drink. It's the product of millions of years of evolution. It's the echo of ancient primates foraging in the African rainforest. It's the taste of 13,000-year-old beer brewed for the dead. It's the fuel that helped build the first temples and the first civilizations. And it's a reminder that we are not separate from our past. We are part of it. The story of alcohol is the story of us.